Now we got to know what are combustible and non-combustible substances. Now, one thing which strikes our mind is that the combustible substances which we are talking about, what are they? They are substances which are being burned during which they are reacting with oxygen and they are producing a lot of energy in the form of heat. So, combustible substances are nothing but fuels. So, fuels are combustible substances which release enough heat energy to be used for domestic and industrial purposes. So, what kind of examples comes to your mind when you think of fuel? You think of coal, you think of petroleum, natural gas. These are all examples of fuels for you. Why are they fuels? Because they are capable of generating huge energy. Now, how do they generate that energy? By the process of combustion. Only when they react with oxygen, they are able to release a lot of energy, and that energy is released in the form of heat, and this process is combustion. So basically, fuels are nothing but the combustible substances. But at the same time, not all combustible substances are fuels. Only those combustible substances which release sufficient amount of energy so that energy can be utilized for different purposes are termed as fuels. For instance, the energy that is generated by burning coal is utilized in several thermal power plants to generate electricity. Similarly, the energy generated out of petroleum, or you can say petrol or diesel, that is used to run vehicles. So that means the energy is huge enough to be used for different purposes. So those kinds of combustible substances are fuels. If we take other examples of fuels like coal, you can say petroleum, whether you have petrol or diesel, you can have LPG, which is put in inside the cylinder, and that produces sufficient energy that helps in your domestic purpose of cooking, right? Natural gas, in fact, biogas, cow dung cakes, wood. And when we talk about fuels, what do you think defines a good fuel? How do we know which is a good fuel and which is not? Because just now I gave you so many examples, as I told you about cow dung cakes. They are also fuels, but they are not preferred to be used because they cause pollution. They adversely affect the health. Now, what are those characteristics which define whether a fuel is a good fuel or a bad fuel? So, first of all, the fuel should be easily available. If the fuel is not accessible, we cannot use it, even though it has a lot of properties, but it doesn't make any sense if the fuel is not available. So the first thing is that the fuel should be easily available. Then the fuel, it has to be cheap. If it's very expensive, then a lot of people will not be able to use it. So it has to be extremely economical. Fuel should burn easily to release heat because a fuel is something which generates energy. In order to generate energy, it has to react with oxygen. Now, easier it reacts with oxygen, the better it is because it immediately reacts with oxygen and a lot of energy is released. That energy released is the basic thing. So it should burn very easily and it should release a lot of heat. So larger the amount of heat it produces, larger energy, it produces large energy, and then that large energy can be utilized for different purposes. Okay, and the next characteristic is that it does not leave undesirable residues behind to cause pollution. Now, see, a lot of fuels generate a lot of energy in the form of heat, but at the same time, they also produce a lot of harmful gases. They generate a lot of smoke, they leave a lot of residue after being burnt, even if you burn completely a particular substance. For instance, when we talk about paper, if you are having paper and you are burning it, you are left behind with ashes. So that is called residue. So whatever is left behind after complete combustion of that substance is called residue. So any fuel which leaves behind a lot of residue, that residue, if it's something which is harmful, then that's waste to our environment, because it's just using that fuel is actually piling up those waste materials in the environment, right? So while deciding whether a fuel is good or not, it's very important to check the type of residue that is being left after the combustion process is over. And a good fuel is one which doesn't leave a lot of undesirable residues, so that it doesn't cause any pollution. Now, it's very important to see that the fuel which we are categorized as a good fuel is the good for the environment. Because if it's harmful to our environment, then basically there's no point to generate energy from such a fuel, which in turn is causing harm to the environment. It's causing harm to us. Okay. Now the question is, how do we know which fuel produces how much energy? So we looked at all the characteristics of fuel, and we said that a good fuel is one which generates high amount of energy. But how do we know which is generating how much energy? How do we measure the amount of energy that is produced by a fuel? For that, we introduce calorific value of the fuel. So, calorific value defines the amount of energy that is produced on complete combustion of 1 kg of a fuel. Fuel is something which burns and produces energy, as we discussed about it. So, calorific value of a fuel is the amount of heat energy that is produced on complete combustion of 1 kg of fuel. Now, we have one particular standard to compare the energy productivity of various fuels. So, higher the calorific value of a fuel, higher is the heat energy produced by that fuel. So, better the fuel is. So, for a good fuel, its calorific value should be higher, and the unit in which it's measured is kilojoules per kg. Okay, as kilojoule is the unit of energy, and kg is the unit of mass, and kilojoules per kg is the unit of calorific value. So the amount of fuel that is being burned to produce energy in terms of joules, therefore the unit is kilojoules per kg. Now let's look at the calorific value of various fuels. If we take coal, its calorific value is around 25,000 to 33,000 kilojoules per kg. That means 1 kg of coal, if burnt, will produce almost 25,000 to 33,000 kilojoules of heat energy. You think of petrol. Petrol, its calorific value is 45,000 kilojoules per kg. So, in case of LPG, if we take LPG, the calorific value of LPG is 55,000 kilojoules per kg. Now, since we have a specific value, it becomes very easy to decide which is a better fuel in terms of the amount of energy produced. So, out of these three, coal, petrol, and LPG, out of these three, the highest calorific value is of LPG, right? 55,000 kilojoules. So, therefore, LPG is a better fuel than petrol, than coal in terms of calorific value. If we take the example of a biogas, it's made of the remains of dead plants and animals. And biogas has a calorific value of around 35,000 to 40,000 kilojoules per kg. If we take wood, wood has a calorific value of 17,000 to 22,000 kilojoules per kg. So if you compare all these values, you see the minimum calorific value is that of wood, right? And the maximum calorific value is that of LPG. So if I ask you in terms of energy produced, which is a better fuel among these, so you can say that LPG is the better fuel, right? Best fuel here is LPG, and the most worst one will be wood, right? So that is how calorific value helps us to decide heat productivity of a fuel. This was all about calorific value of a fuel.